Okay, thank you, everyone. Sorry, I'm late today. So we'll start, as usual, with motivation and some quiet practice, and then we'll have a little bit of a different session today with poetry from different Buddhist traditions, mainly from the Tibetan tradition, but covering different aspects of the path. So hopefully that will be interesting. And there will be at least one excerpt from a Western poet to give some contrast. But we'll focus on poetry from the Indian tradition, let's say, the Indian and the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, from the great Mahasiddhas through Milarepa and so forth. And we won't have time to cover everything that I want to cover today. We will probably need to have another session at some point. Okay, so before I forget, I would also announce that we probably have some diversification of Tushita programs here. So one day I'm thinking we should have a session of poetry, Dharma poetry, Buddhist poetry, inner poetry, one might say, and in which people can participate, bring their favorite Dharma poems, or any poem that they may have written themselves, arising out of their practice. That could be very interesting and useful. So, yeah, just to let you know that will be, I think, happening at some point. I don't have any idea of a date yet. It's just something I thought of. Okay, so let's bring our attention to where we are right now, which is not as easy as it sounds, because the tendency of the mind to go off in all directions. So let's see if we can just withdraw, as some traditions put it. I think the Buddhist tradition may also have this analogy of the tortoise withdrawing its limbs. If you come close to a tortoise and it feels threatened, it will withdraw everything. The head, the feet also withdraw into the shell. Of course, that is done out of fear and for protection and safety. We're, in a sense, also, of course, engaging in that for similar reasons, hopefully not too much fear, but definitely with an understanding that the senses, although one might say extraordinary, and our link with the world, are, from the point of view of inner work, also potentially distracting, right? They draw our attention outwards. Most of us are very caught up with the visual sense. Those of us who are artistic in terms of painting and so forth, that might be extraordinarily developed. Those who are more inclined towards music and sound, then of course the ear consciousness is so powerful, so active, let's say. So here we are, we're not ignoring, we're not rejecting the senses. They are, as I said, our gateway, our link with the world, with our world. We're not yet great yogis who can link up with some kind of deeper inner awareness yet. But however, for the time being, we can experiment with just letting go a little bit of the fascination and being caught up with the outer, with outer sounds, smells, sights, even with taste and touch. Although touch, sensation is something we are going to be working with, because we'll be working with sensation of the breath as we breathe in and out normally. So that we will not give up completely. That is a very useful anchor for now to stabilize the mind. Okay, so just to repeat a few basics. When, as we sit now briefly, let there be a sense of stillness in the body, a sense of ease and relaxation, because we are not here to create even more tension in ourselves. We already have enough of that, especially those of us in urban settings, although need not be need not be so. So stillness, ease, a sense of relaxation, but also, of course, attentiveness, awareness. A very basic Buddhist text, the Dhammapada, states that very briefly and concisely that awareness is the life of the path. And lack of awareness is the path of degeneration, of death, spiritual death. So there needs to be a sense of awareness, a basic awareness. There are many levels of awareness, but just a basic awareness of what's happening. So let's sit upright with our eyes closed, our head tilted slightly downwards to create to create ease really in the neck muscles. The head is quite heavy. If we keep it held up all the time, it's quite a strain on the neck muscles. So let it just tilt a little downwards, not too far, not as though you are about to go to sleep during a boring lecture, but slightly inclined forwards. Arms resting in the lap or on the thighs or knees, the hands rather, and the arms slightly away from the body to allow a gap for circulation. They're relaxed, they're not stretched out stiff. Let there be relaxation in the muscles of the face. Around the eyes, around the mouth, the jaw. It's very easy to accumulate tension in those areas, since we do a lot of talking and thinking, and that immediately affects the face muscles. Of course, it affects muscles all over the place, but the face as well. So let there be a gentleness in the contours of the face, like perhaps your favorite, some of the statues, or paintings of, say, the Buddha or Tara. Very beautiful, relaxed features. Check for tension in the shoulders, in the solar plexus. Chest. Let there be a letting go in those areas. Just imagine you are releasing with the out breath. You're letting go of any tension with the out breath. Not trying to control the breath, but we are aware, so we will be aware. We will recognize thoughts arising, and here we're not going to follow thoughts. We're going to just let them go and come back to the breath. Just let them go, not with irritation, not with any thought that it's some kind of mistake to have thoughts. Thoughts are natural. But here we're not going to cling to them or follow associative thought. We're going to let it go and gently come back to the breath. It doesn't matter how often we need to do that. The out breath can be an excellent vehicle for letting go and relaxing. And the in breath naturally happens. Let there be awareness of the letting go, the relaxing with the out breath. Any particular sensations in the body, then just be aware of it. Gently be aware of it. That there's no need to get caught up with it or to think that it's something to hold on to or something to reject. Just awareness. Then after a while, you can gently let it go. Come back to the breath. Be aware of your posture. Upright, head tilted slightly downwards, not up in the air. Just a few more minutes. Maintain the sense of stillness, sense of ease, and the attentiveness. Even subtle holding in parts of the body can be noticed if we've been still for a little while. And just gently let that go as well. You may find some slight tension in part of the arm or leg, the fingers. Bring awareness to that and just let it go. Feel it's just leaving with the out breath. One particular poet called the process of sitting still and paying attention a sudden strangeness. He said it would be like we were all sitting together in a sudden strangeness. It is a little strange to the mind that is used to racing here and there. Daily habit of distraction. But strangeness is okay. Strangeness. If everything were always familiar and routine, might not work. Okay, thank you all very much, and big welcome to new people or people who haven't been here for a while. And good old friend from Australia, Jan, is here with us, and a few people from the UK, from England. And nice to see others as well. Abhishek ji and so forth. Tejal ji is here. Tejal used to work at Tushita. In fact, Tejal is teaching a course at Deer Park Institute in Bir before long, and they are incorporating poetry and the arts in that course. So since she had access to my library at home, it reminded me that we should also have a session where we have poetry, but not just any old poetry, hopefully excellent quality poetry from realized people to start with. Later we can experiment with our own poetry, our own little realizations. But today we'll be sharing some gems from the Indo-Tibetan tradition. I say Indo-Tibetan, so and explain it briefly to newcomers in case. So-called Tibetan Buddhism has its roots in, of course, Indian Buddhism. Buddha was in India, and the great University of Nalanda, which was flourishing from 2nd, 3rd century probably onwards until, or the 4th century onwards until 12th, 13th century. That was an incredible treasure house of great teachers, students, and all kinds of great masters, Mahasiddhas, or people with great realizations were teaching there, studying there, including Shantideva, whom we've been studying. No, I'm not actually going to quote Shantideva today. Maybe I should have, because that is also poetry. And the originals of most of this are in Pali, are in Sanskrit, are in variations of that. But since I don't know Sanskrit, and most of us don't know Sanskrit, it's all English translation, not even Hindi translation, but English. And I think they're very good translations, and we can get a lot of benefit from it. And of course, those who want to go to the originals, that would be amazing. Okay, well, someone is providing me now. Sagar has brought me Shantideva in case. And of course, there's beautiful verses in Shantideva on some of the topics that we want to look at. I don't know why I forgot Shantideva. Maybe because we've been looking at his work so much in the last few months. But we will now certainly recite a few verses from Shantideva today as well. And I doubt I will finish, or we shall finish what needs to be done today, but that's okay. It gives us something to look forward to in the future. Why, they say rather than have one huge meal, better to have lots of little meals, better for health. So we'll have more poetry later, if we're allowed, if it works out. Okay, so where to begin? Just to let you know, the selection today will be from Milarepa, the great 11th century yogi, probably the most famous Tibetan yogi, whose life was brought to the notice of at least the Western public by Evans Wentz in the 50s, 60s, whenever, and the life of Milarepa. Tibet's great yogi Milarepa, that was the title of the book he wrote about this extraordinary man who started his life as an ordinary person, you could say, and who was forced to engage in wrongdoing, including killing, for the sake of his family, let's say, and who renounced that, searched for a teacher, found a teacher, was put through a lot of suffering, you could say, by his teacher. The teacher realizing that this guy needed to purify a lot due to what he had done earlier in his life. And anyway, having received teachings finally from this teacher, he went into the mountains and remain there for the rest of his life, basically, singing songs of realization and awakening, it is said, enlightenment, full enlightenment at the time of death, which is a special time for yogis. The mind naturally becomes very subtle and more you could say, more utilizable for great yogis at the time of death. Anyway, so Milarepa. Then we will look at somebody in between. We look at Shabkar, who lived from 1781, I think, 1781 to 1851. So he's interesting. He's kind of contemporary of Beethoven, if you want to look at it that way. Beethoven was born a bit earlier, I think, 1770 possibly. Anyway, just to give you an idea, in 1851, so that's, those of you who studied history, these dates, French Revolution time, 1789, French Revolution, just gives some insight into when these beings are around in Tibet, which very few people knew about then, I guess. Very few travelers had been. Some intrepid travelers had been to Tibet. Some hadn't met with a very pleasant welcome. Some, I think, had been killed. And then some got through and somehow had a connection with the rulers and got friendly and so forth. But anyway, Shabkar. And Shabkar is considered in the Tibetan tradition to have been a continuity of the consciousness of Milarepa. So kind of reincarnation of Milarepa. And again, incredible poetry, incredible. This is the book I brought. I carried a lot of books from home for you guys, about 6-7 kilos of books to help keep us company. So Shabkar, then there are some extraordinary verses by early women practitioners in the Therigatha, poems of the first Buddhist women. We'll be looking at that. And here again, some amazing, composed more than 2 millennia ago, right? We're talking more than 2,000 years ago, pretty much. A lot of these unknown women practitioners, most of whom started life cooking and cleaning and being wives and mothers, many of them, and then turning to the Dharma, and many of them becoming nuns. So there's some fascinating poetry there. Then also Tilopa, the very incredible teacher in the lineage of Marpa and Milarepa, whom we mentioned. We mentioned Milarepa. So we'll have so there's a whole bunch of things to look at today. It's hard to know really where to start. There'll also be some verses from Longchenpa and from various other Indian and Tibetan so-called Mahasiddhas. Mahasiddhas means literally great accomplishments or great, sometimes associated with powers, magical powers, which to ordinary mind are magical. But basically it refers to people who have attained very high states of realization. Shantideva was supposed also to be a Mahasiddha, not just a kind of a monk in a monastery or in Nalanda, but he was also a greatly accomplished master who actually gave up his monastic ordination later in his life. Okay, so let's get to the poetry. Meanwhile, I hope all of you are well and comfortable, and it's nice to see larger numbers. I thought the poetry might attract more people today, since people were bored with immeasurable loving kindness and all that stuff. So poetry it is. I'm sure when we advertise the course with some music or singing, there'll be even more people. Well, TK, that's good. There's nothing wrong with poetry and music, as far as I can tell. Unless you're trying to do a very one-pointed retreat, then it's a distraction. Can be, could be. Okay, starting with something from the book on Shabkar, extraordinary, a great work by this Mathieu Ricard, a French monk who's known as the happiest person in the world. He's written a lot on happiness and so forth, a French monk. So in the introduction, he says this, if I can find, yeah. Okay. So this is somebody who spent a lot of his time traveling, an itinerant yogi, not staying in one place for long, traveling here and there in Tibet. And he was very open-minded. His songs teach us the value and significance of human life, the meaning of death and impermanence, law of cause and effect, and the suffering or unsatisfactory nature of ordinary existence, rooted in ignorance and clinging and so forth. He sings about the benefits of renunciation, the need to rely upon a qualified teacher, to cultivate devotion. And of course, a lot of his songs are connected with the great compassion, bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain awakening for the sake of all beings. And of course, the proper view of understanding of reality, how things exist, not our manufactured, ignorant way of understanding reality, but actual view of how things are. He had tremendous realization. He was very simple. He doesn't write to flaunt his knowledge or his poetic skills or anything like that. Simply wants to turn people's minds towards the truth, towards the Dharma, towards the way things are. You could say that a lot of his poetry is connected with what his predecessor, it is said, his 11th century predecessor wrote, what Milarepa wrote when he said, that, excuse me, toss to the winds your concern for this life and bring to your mind, impress upon your mind the unknown time of your death. Remembering the pain of samsara, why long for the unnecessary? So a lot of his poetry, of course, is connected with that. And his life story, according to Matthew Ricard, can move one to tears and sometimes to laughter. But he says, as one reads it, and this is from Dingo Chensa Rinpoche, says this, he was a very, very great modern master who passed away in 1991. He said, as you read Shabkar, your mind cannot resist being turned towards the Dharma, towards the teachings, towards the truth, yeah, of how things are, as well as to the mind of great compassion. So there are those two elements always there, right? In the poetry of the great masters, they talk about renunciation, they talk about great compassion, the aspiration to enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, what we call bodhicitta, which is the culmination of compassion. And they speak about what we call the view, the correct view, or the understanding of reality, how we exist, what is our true nature, what's the nature of myself and all things. So this is what the writings are about. Okay, so let us start then with some of Shabkar's verses. He's also someone, by the way, this is so important nowadays, so important. Shabkar was someone who was beyond any kind of sectarianism. There are 4 great schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And in the past, there have been tremendous competitiveness and even violence between some of the schools, unfortunately, very unfortunately. And of course, that one-upmanship and competitiveness still carries on to this day and is very destructive, since all of them derive from the teachings of Lord Buddha. They're all basically saying the same thing, some slightly different ways and emphases in some of the schools' teachings occasionally, but basically they're saying the same thing. But there can be a lot of narrow-mindedness and clinging to one's own particular school. I mean, we're Yellow Hat School, Gelugpa School. It was the last school to emerge the early 15th century, whereas the first of the Tibetan Buddhist schools emerged in the 8th century. So anyway, Shabkar was beyond all of that. And he, through his realization, he knew the essential oneness of all of the traditions. And he made, as this introduction says, he made fruitful use of the extraordinary potential inherent in combining the altruistic mind training taught by the great Atisha, developed by Tsongkhapa, who was the founder of the Yellow Hat School, with the most profound practices of the earliest tradition, the Nyingma, the ones who started in the 8th century. So he brought those together because his point was to benefit people, right? So you don't benefit people by just promoting one particular school, which you know will create divisiveness. He brought things together. And he realized all Buddhist traditions to be non-contradictory. In essence, they're non-contradictory. And people take that to be a sign of Shabkar's greatness and of his realization. So he says, and this is the first of our poetic utterances, it will read like prose, but a little bit, but I'll try and recite it intelligently. And if you listen attentively, hopefully it can be beneficial. So here is Shabkar speaking from the early 19th century, from Tibet. In the snow ranges of Tibet, owing to the kindness of the sublime beings of the past, many profound teachings were taught. These days, most practitioners hold the various teachings to be contradictory, like heat and cold. They praise some teachings and disparage others. Some holy beings have said that Madhyamaka, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen are like sugar, molasses, and honey. One is as good as the other. For this reason, I have listened to and practiced all of them without partiality. So he's saying how, he is someone who could be relied upon to speak without bias, without partiality. He's not pushing any particular brand, He's not a spokesman for some brand, as opposed to, he's not a Pepsi Cola rather than Coca-Cola or something like that. Okay, we'll stay with Shabkar for a while. Somebody asked him, you see, people would ask, and then these holy beings would just spontaneously sing poems of realization and teach that way. That's what Milarepa did, that's what Shabkar did. Some modern masters have also been known to do that. Some great modern masters, they spontaneously come up with a poem or verses that inspire others. Okay, so somebody asked him, when the holy beings of old sang their songs, it brought great benefit. Has the same benefit come about from your songs? So then Shabkar says, in reply, I sang of how many disciples had been benefited. All the wise sages of old, from India and Tibet, expressed in song the meaning of the sutras and the tantras, and by doing so, immensely benefited beings. I also sang, in accord with the words of the holy ones, of the way to rely on the Father Guru. Many came to follow in this way. When I sang that a human body complete with the freedoms and endowments is valuable and difficult to obtain, many entered the door of the Dharma. When I sang that as the days, months, and years slip by, one's life soon comes to its end, and that everyone sooner or later will die, then many gave up their concerns, which were limited to just this life. When I sang that constructive and destructive deeds bear their inevitable fruits and must be respectively performed or avoided, many gave up misdeeds to practice virtue. When I sang that deep in samsara's ocean of suffering, there is not the slightest bit of true happiness, many develop weariness and revulsion. All of this we can discuss, of course, a little. For those who are hearing these kind of words for the first time, it's unusual, strange. But he's speaking about ordinary, habitual living. He's saying many develop weariness and revulsion towards that by listening to my songs. When I sang that all the beings in the 6 realms, that is human realm, animal realm, God realms, two levels of gods, ghostly kind of beings with tremendous suffering, and hell beings. When I sang that all the beings of the 6 realms have been, without exception, our kind mothers, then many developed love and compassion. When I sang of how, having received teachings on Sutra, Tantra, and the pith instructions of the Guru, I practiced meditation to realize these teachings, many who had listened to the Dharma actually began to practice. When I sang of the results of Dharma practice in mountain retreats, where past saints lived, many went to live in solitary places. When I sang that all the philosophical views flourishing in the land of Tibet were pure traditions, many developed pure perception. Pure perception is very important in Buddhism. You could say it's also understood in modern psychology to some extent, pop psychology. I mean, that if we're always thinking of the bad things about other people, then that's what we tend to experience in the others. And of course, about ourselves too. If we keep on thinking I'm bad or I'm useless, that is what we get used to perceiving and experiencing. So pure perception, where there's a sense that, of course, we understand what is wrong, but there's this sense of seeing also the purity that is also intrinsic to life, if one goes deeper into one's practice. So practicing pure perception, and of course it's easier to practice pure perception in beautiful places where there's a lot of nature, for example, and so forth. So anyway, it's good to have the perception that all of the teachers, all of the traditions are beneficial, just like many kinds of food and medicine. Different food and medicine are beneficial for different constitutions, different people. Not everyone needs the same medicine. In fact, not at all. Some people are harmed by certain medicines that may benefit other people. So similarly, there are many, many different ways of benefiting others through the teachings. And so just one verse from, again, he would be inspired by nature, by animals, by birds. So this is what he sang. I won't read all of it, but a few verses. This is what he sang when he saw an eagle soaring in the sky. And one could imagine that in Tibet, in those days, there weren't any airplanes, there weren't anything to disturb nature. So there was much, much, much more wildlife than there is now. As you know, wildlife is on an incredible decline, according to the figures, all over the world. And Tibet, of course, as well. One day, he said, I watched an eagle, the king of birds, gliding in the sky. And as it soared higher and higher, this song burst into my mind. You, royal eagle, soaring in the firmament, circling in the midst of the azure sky, in whichever of the 4 directions you go, please carry this message of mine. Tell the people from the southern continent of the rose apple tree, that refers to this continent, this earth, that since their ability to recognize right and wrong is the result of having practiced the Dharma in former lives, they should practice the Dharma even more. If you go towards the West, request Buddha Amitabha to appear wherever people die and lead them to the blissful Buddha fields. Tell the people of the northern continent that since their longevity is the result of having protected the lives of others in former lifetimes, they should protect others' lives even more now. As I was singing, the eagle soared higher and higher in space, gliding towards the east. I watched him until I could see him no longer. I thought how nice it would be if I had unlimited miraculous powers and could fly east like that eagle and reach the realm of manifest joy. Since I'm here, and I might forget later in the book, of course, this is a book of over 600 pages, and one has not read all of it. He's talking about the joys of, again and again, they speak about the joy of being basically alone and in the mountains and in inaccessible places. So obviously, of course, they didn't have the misfortune to have been brought up with electricity and, all the other things we enjoy. So they grew up in, leading, by our standards, incredibly simple lives, right? From the time they were born, all of these people. But yeah, it was an extra, initially maybe hardship and simplicity to live like a wild animal almost, up in mountain places. Some of them had helpers who would bring food up to their caves and so forth, but some of the yogis didn't. They would just find what they could. Although, yeah, I guess a lot of them would have been fed by villagers who would come up with food and so forth. Yeah, there's probably scholarship on that, which I haven't read. How did mountain yogis survive? Maybe some of us could write a thesis on that. Of course, Milarepa is famously said to have eaten nettles, a lot of nettles, and turned a little greenish as a result. Yeah, I'm sure there are many things that they ate. And I don't suppose all of them were totally vegetarian either. I'm not sure. Okay. From time to time, examine the mind with analytic insight. Ascertain that the mind is not something graspable. Neither it has center or boundary. And let this discovery expand. This is very important. One could spend a whole session on this, but basically, again, for people who, maybe a little new, Buddhism does not think the mind is just the brain. If the mind were just the brain, then of course at death, everything's over. Everything's over forever. But from the Buddhist perspective, mind is beginningless. Consciousness is beginningless and endless. It is connected deeply, of course, with the brain while we're in this body, but it is not the brain. It's not just some byproduct of the brain, of neurocircuitry. It's something deeper than that. And it survives the death of the body. The subtle aspect of the mind survives the death of the body. Anyway, so he's saying this mind has neither center nor boundary. It's not something you can grasp. We feel we can grasp onto the body, bodily things. The mind, it can't. It doesn't have shape, color, smell. It's awareness. But there is awareness. And even that's not graspable, he said. What will you grasp? Anyway, this is something, he says, when the mind contracts itself like an old scroll rolling itself up, you feel contracted and tight, or you feel you could grasp something. Then he says, examine mind thoroughly, time and again. This is a profound instruction. Then he says, joyous, and now he will soon merge the spirit of compassion with this insight. Joyous when day or night, indoors and outdoors, eyes open or closed, makes no difference to your awareness. Wondrous when the world of form appears like a rainbow in the unchanging sky. Joyous to dredge the depths of samsara, bringing all beings to enlightenment. I love that image. Dredging, like you dredge, bring up all the dirt, clear something out. You're saying you dredge samsara, bring up all the suffering beings, dredge them out of samsara, bring them to awakening and enlightenment out of that. Tremendous compassion for suffering beings. Yeah. Joyous to dredge the depths of samsara, bringing all beings to enlightenment. You see, we should have actually done it this way. This is just a preliminary session. We could spend several sessions in devoting one session per Mahasiddha, per one session for each great being. Sorry, I forgot to put my own phone on silent. Now he's speaking about where he was. Of course, he went from here to there. He's speaking about one place that he meditated in central Tibet somewhere. Cliffs rise up, lofty and majestic. On one side is a colony of vultures that make the mountain hermits think, this is the kind of place we need. Of course, vultures are associated with death in Tibetan Buddhism because traditionally when you died, your body was chopped up, mixed with roasted barley and fed to the vultures. After a nice gap after death, they didn't do it immediately because they feel that the actual subtle consciousness can stay in the body for a few days after death. So they wouldn't chop you up immediately, but you would get chopped up, mixed with barley, taken to the top of a mountain. And there's a video on this on the net. I saw incredible number, hundreds and hundreds of vultures coming and eating the dead body. We used to have vultures right here in horse cars in Delhi, but haven't seen them for 25, 30 years. We used to have vultures here. They died because of they died off due to some pesticide or chemical they reckon. Anyway, so he says the yogi, when they see vultures, they want to be in that place. That's where they want to be. Yeah. It is wrapped in silvery mists and is capped becomingly with many caves that makes one want to wear mist as a mantle and the cave as a hat. On the slopes are grasslands with thickets of medicinal plants, meadows blanketed with bright flowers. Physicians come here to collect medicinal herbs. Tibetan medicine is traditionally gathered from such places and of course becoming much rarer due to climate change, environmental pollution and so forth. The mountain is rich in colors, its range unfolds in splendid shapes. Climbing to the summit, one can see far and wide. This is why noble families and merchants come here to enjoy pleasant excursions. Tibetans love picnics. They absolutely adore picnics. Find any open space, you'll have a picnic. So you can imagine, and there's these amazing photographs of Dingo Chense Rinpoche, this great Lama, going back to Tibet on pilgrimage, and the incredible meadows of wildflowers, beautiful landscapes in still, at least he did that in the 80s, I guess, late 80s, but at that point, still beautiful valleys full of flowers and meadows in certain parts, lowland parts of Tibet. So beautiful, so beautiful. Perfect for picnic. Mongolia is a little bit like that, but when I was in Mongolia, there weren't so many flowers, but very amazing, beautiful landscape. If you ever get a chance to go to Mongolia, take it. But make sure you get out of the capital. Don't stay in the capital. It's a disaster. apart from some amazing cultural, amazing art, which the Soviet communists didn't destroy. But apart from that, it's a bit of a mess. So go out into the countryside. Beautiful, vast. Go to an area where they're not mining or destroying it. There's still a lot of it left. It's a vast country. Anyway, and great for meditation. Vast, mountain steppes, landscape. Beautiful, really beautiful. Spacious. The nomads' cows eat potent medicinal herbs. Therefore, drinking their curd and whey naturally cures most diseases. How about that? Hippocrates said that food should be your medicine, right? Nowadays, I don't know. We can't trust all the organic labels either, But in those days, food could truly be your medicine because your cows are eating, they're not being injected with hormones and kept in a cage. They're eating medicinal plants and grasses, and they're happy because they're in a beautiful place. Shepherds here and there on the mountain sing spirited songs that make renunciates meditating nearby burst out in laughter. Do you hear people singing in your corporate office? Do you hear people singing? Yeah, maybe yours because you're a singer, but you're a lucky one. In the office, people, if they want entertainment, they're looking on the net, right? Goodness knows what they're looking at. The pure, fresh, limpid springs nearby are enlivened by tadpoles and other tiny creatures. Just by drinking or bathing in this water, well-being increases, awareness becomes clear. I remember trekking in the Pennines, walking the Pennine Way in 1979, and you could still drink some water in the springs. And a few years ago in Bhutan, Tejal is still here. Yeah, Tejal will remember. Tejal was also in Bhutan that time. You could drink. I drank water in some of the streams in central Bhutan. It was wonderful. No ill effects, as far as I know. Yeah. All kinds of wild animals frolic there. Large and small birds emit sweet calls. Whoever comes here is enchanted and wishes nothing more but to stay on. There are still some places, although if you want a lot of sounds like that, you need to go to a good zoo. But otherwise, there are beautiful places. There are places where there's still a lot of birdsong, including South Delhi, quite frankly. We have so many woods and trees here that there are a lot of birdsong. In summer, the blue cuckoo parades his beauty and voices his clear calls. Remembering the Father Guru, one cannot help but weep. So Shabkar is saying that nature is bringing out all this devotion also. He remembers his kind teacher, who brought him onto the spiritual path and who gave him guidance. And through whose kindness and teachings, he's now able to meditate on his own and enjoy being where he is. So he remembers the teacher, and tears of devotion come to his eyes. Nettles, wild garlic, other edible plants provide food for the ascetic. The answer to our question. It's making one recall Milarepa's life and wish to live in a completely simple way. In the hermitages, here and there, live spiritual teachers and spiritual companions who give initiations and instructions to beginners who need them. So yeah, you're not completely, one can go to places where there's teachers. Below lies the pleasant town of Lhasa. Okay, so here's talking of a place not far from Lhasa, the capital, right? Where all food and desirable things abound. From there, faithful and wealthy patrons will provide one with sustenance. It was accepted. You didn't say, oh, they're wasting their life. Why should I support them? They should get a job, and work in an office like me. No, people were happy to provide. Those who had renounced and who were engaging in spiritual pursuits. They didn't think, he's a, what do you call, scrounger. They didn't think that. Concentrating on spiritual practice, as my master directed me, I pray again and again that as the fruit of my practice, I may benefit the Dharma and sentient beings. He doesn't say as the fruit of my practice, may I become famous and, but he's saying, may I benefit the teachings and living beings. That's the purpose, to benefit others, not one's own private purpose. So those of you who aspire from your hearts to emulate the example of your forefathers and give up all thoughts of this life to live in harmony with the Dharma, come here and you will succeed. Saying to people, come here, you will succeed in a place like this, Of course, with the requisite teachings and devotion, obviously. If you're addicted to gambling, then you have to stay in Lhasa. You can't go up in the mountain. No one's gambling up there. I mean, gamble with your life, yeah, wild crevices and so forth. But there's no one to play cards with you. There's no alcohol up there in the mountains. There's no, brothels, no whatever, no cabarets, no film shows, no nothing. It's yourself, the birds, the eagles, the wildflowers, the nettles. I hope many of you have been to wild places like that. If not, you must go there before they disappear. So you have some subliminal memory when you die that you can be reborn in a place where there is wildness like that. Yeah. Faithful ones who want to do pilgrimage, physicians who want to collect medicinal plants, noblemen who want to enjoy delightful recreation, come here. Good will come about for all. And then he dedicates, at the end of things, one dedicates the positive energy. By the merit of having praised to this holy place, may Dharma practitioners remain in mountain retreats. May all countries enjoy good harvests. May everyone practice the Dharma. So he said he stayed 9 months in that place that he's speaking about. He spent 9 months persevering in practice. And he says that there he composed something that he calls in English, the amazing emanated scripture, a treatise that leads one to consider the shortcomings of the 5 sense pleasures in general, and especially the craving for food, clothing, and sex. It then tells of the need to rid oneself of the preoccupations of this life, to devote oneself to spiritual practice in remote solitudes, and be unattached to body, life, and possessions. So there you go. Not for everyone, but good to realize that the people who have been through ordinary, so-called ordinary life with all of these pleasures that he mentions, food, clothing, sex, and when they do develop insight and awareness through teachings and so forth of the inner awareness of the deeper levels of mind, they say nothing compares with that. My own teacher, Lama Yeshe, that corner, Lama Yeshe, used to say, ordinary worldly pleasures, they're not a fraction of the bliss and happiness one develops through, I think what he called developing the inner chocolate factory. He used someone on his own. The inner chocolate factory is incomparable. When of course, one needs some devotion and time and effort to practice those inner yogas. It doesn't come about immediately, obviously. But the inner satisfaction from genuine spiritual practice is far greater than the temporary pleasures, changeable pleasures of ordinary life, which of course can be perceived as very amazing, but they're very transitory. Please have a break if you need and have a juice, have a transitory pleasure. I'm having mixed fruit delight Tropicana. Probably ruined my throat, but it tastes nice. I hope you online are well entertained with well provided. None of you living in mountain fastnesses there with the internet. Hello, Jan. I can't see half of your face. You need to adjust your screen. Hello there. Hope you're not bored by all this poetry and digressions. One day we'll have Vikram, I hope you're not bored. You can nod because you're all muted for now. Ajirji is deep in Samadhi as usual. Wherever Ajirji is, he turns it into a mountain retreat cave. You can see Ajirji there at the top of the screen. And I think he's got a meditation band around him. Elaine, yeah, you also look very blissful wherever you are. Neerajji, hi. Namaskar. So all of you, yeah, thank you for staying on. There's some very juicy poetry coming up, so don't go away. By the nuns. The nuns have the juiciest poetry. As one might imagine. Sorry. कैसे हो? बढ़िया. कुछ फिल्म बन रहा है आजकल? वही सोच रहा हूँ. I have some ideas. Magic bus. Really? We want to. I'll wait till your husband gets back. Is he into rock and roll as well? At all? So. Not so much. A bit less, yeah. I was just asking if you were into rock and roll. At all.
I
used to.
When I was a teenager, I used to.
Oh no, when you were a teenager. Yeah. You mean you've outgrown it?
I play it less these days, because these days most of the evening I play.
You're familiar with Magic Bus by The Who?
The Who is one real.
Is that a blind spot?
In my.
Oh, you will enjoy The Who. Please listen to The Who.
My uncle was extremely perturbed by this blind spot.
By the?
By the blind spot. By the fact that I didn't know the Who. He was very bothered by it. And my cousin as well.
Okay.
So the song that I must listen to is?
Well, now you're the second, third person who's telling you. Yeah. Anyway, no, I thought to put Magic Bust and make a
Magic Bust.
A video. It's just one of many classics that The Who brought out. But I guess I don't know if it's a generational thing. I guess if you listen to things enough at a certain time, there's a certain zeitgeist, isn't there? Spirit of the time, which. But some things are timeless, right?
Of course. And there's a lot of bands that are contemporary that I know they do very well.
We have a musician here, by the way, from England, and a music teacher. So I'm merrily discussing with him a few things in the break. Yes. You're here till when, both of you?
Till July.
Oh, we must have a session. Really?
Absolutely.
With some music and poetry.
I bring my instrument.
Yeah. You said you played the accordion.
Play the accordion, among other things, but that's my main instrument.
And guitar?
Yes.
Any classical instruments?
I grew up playing the piano, so the instrument that I've kind of studied most at the most advanced level is the piano.
Well,
and I earned across all through my 20s by teaching piano.
Well, we can't get a Beckstein or Steinway in here, but maybe we can arrange something.
It's just the piano on your chest.
Piano on your chest? Oh, the accordion, yes. Yeah. Banjo?
I could fake it, but I'm not a banjo player.
I love that. Have you seen Deliverance? So that episode, Dueling Banjos from the film Deliverance.
Oh, I know that. I know the scene.
That little segment. Beautiful. You've seen it, Bob?
Yes, Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds, I believe so. Yes. Yeah, everyone dies. It's terrible. It's true. It's true. Yeah.
He's still alive.
He's still alive? Oh, good for him. He died in the film. Did he die in the film? Anyway, okay, we're digressing now and people are complaining. And Elaine Kocher. Elaine has C'est la vie as your logo. Very good. That's French.
One more quick digression, if I may.
Yes.
I also run a singing group, if anyone would like to join.
Yes. What kind of singing?
It's a thing called Sacred Harp Singing.
Wow.
It's an early American folk hymn tradition from the early 19th century.
Oh.
And it's very loud, cathartic.
Loud, cathartic, folks online.
So yeah, it comes from the Christian tradition, but it's non-denominational.
The black congregations use a lot. That kind?
Originally, yes, though sadly in the black communities that were singing sacred harp music, they all died out in the 70s and 80s.
Oh.
Partly because gospel music became so, this is kind of proto-gospel music in some ways. So gospel kind of killed sacred harp, but it survived in the deep south among the white Christian communities there generally. And then it started to spread around the world in the 80s and 90s. So I started a group here in Delhi.
I definitely would. Yeah. Would you say that it tends towards what, spiritual awareness, spiritual experience, or
I would say so, but probably not in exactly the same. No, I absolutely, absolutely yes.
Perhaps, because you need to learn the technique.
Sure.
And then once you've learned the technique and you know how to do it a bit better, then you can let yourself go a lot more. And you're surrounded by beautiful.
You practiced as well?
I do.
Willy-nilly. Yeah, you have to.
It's in my house, so I can't not.
So I would say that at the current, because the group that I've started is relatively young.
Okay. Now this is, good digression. Can we do later?
Yeah.
And we have all these people online, these poor 20 people today, and we must give them their money's worth. They're beginning to frown, even the people from Pune and Australia. So we've got to be careful there. So best. Okay, so now some amazing poems from the first Buddhist women, so-called Buddhist women. And so let's see what they have to say. So I open up on a page which I had hoped I would, even though there's no marker there. All right, so this does not give the name of the nun, but it just says the verses of a certain nun, a certain nun. She was certainly a nun, and she was a specific nun. She was a person. It's not imagined, I guess. Okay, so I hope you're ready for this. They also give the Pali, which is great for those who know Pali, but I'm going to obviously read the English because I don't know Pali. The verses of a certain nun. It's been 25 years since I renounced, but not for a moment, not even a finger's snap, did I experience stilling of my mind. Wow, very honest. With no peace in my heart, dripping with sexual desire, I entered the monastery. I guess nunnery. I mean, she's not supposed to go into a monastery. That's where monks are, right? I think they mean nunnery. I hope so. Anyway, with no peace in my heart, dripping with sexual desire, I entered the monastery, wailing, my arms outstretched. I approached the nun. Okay, it's a nunnery, I think. She seemed like someone I could trust. She taught me the Dharma, about what makes a person, about the senses and their objects, and about the basic elements that make up everything. Hearing the Dhamma from her, I came to her side. I know my previous lives, and the eye that can see the invisible is clear. I know the ways of my heart. Now I hear clearly. powers beyond normal are known at first hand. The depravities that ooze out from within are wasted away. The 6 powers are attained. The teaching of the Buddha is done. So what are the 6 powers? Let us just check what are the 6 powers she's talking about. Sounds like she's attained quite a lot in her 25 years. The 6 powers. Okay, I have to see the glossary for this one. Six powers beyond normal that allow one to have direct knowledge of things that otherwise are not known. So she says she has obtained it. These powers are: 1, possessing the divine eye. I think that means being able to see things at a great distance. The divine ear, being able to hear things that are happening at a great distance, like a very great distance, not just a couple of 100 meters or something, long distances. Psychic powers in general, well, that could be many things. Mainly, 4, knowledge of other people's thoughts. I have experience of others knowing that about me. I don't have that power, but I know that my teachers have it because of what they've said to me. 5, the recollection of former lives. 6, knowledge of the destruction of the depravities that ooze out from within. Asavas, the asavas. What is an asava? The depravity that ooze out from within. In Buddhist psychology, these are features of corrupting dispositions of being that befoul our minds like discharges from a saw. Freedom from these depravities is a contour of enlightenment. These are often linked with other latent dispositions in our moral psychology, such as the klesha, which are ignorance, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, deluded doubt, so forth. So she's understood that. She's attained those 6 powers. Maybe not to the extent that a Buddha has, because that's the highest level, but she's attained something. And she started off, as she said, entering the monastery, wailing, my arms outstretched, because of the, the desires within her. And presumably not being satisfied with being like that. This is somebody called Vimala. Intoxicated by my good looks, by my body, my beauty, my reputation, haughty because of my youth, I looked down on other women. I decorated this body, decked out, it made fools mutter. A prostitute at the door, like a hunter spreading out the snare. I flashed my ornaments as if I was showing my hidden parts. I created illusions for people, all the while sneering at them. Today, I collected arms, head shaved, covered with the outer robe, now seated at the foot of the tree. What I get has nothing to do with schemes. All ties are cut, whether divine or human. I have thrown away all that fouls the heart. I have become cool, free. The word for ethical conduct in Pali is shil, in Sanskrit, shil, which also means cool. It's connected with coolness, with cooling down. Whereas, of course, desire and so forth is connected with heating up. And this is cool, cooled yourself. This is somebody called Siha. Pained by distracted attention and by desire for sex, I was always disturbed, without any control over my thoughts. acting on thoughts of happiness, overcome by defiling compulsions. I had no peace of mind, controlled by a mind bent on excitement. Thin, pallid, and worn, I wandered for 7 years. I didn't experience happiness by day or by night. Intense suffering was what I had. Taking a rope, I went to the forest, thinking it's better to hang than to live this low life. I made the noose strong and tied it to a branch. But just as I looped it around my neck, my mind was set free. A couple more from this amazing collection.
At the end. At the end.
That's the end, yeah. Wow. Obviously, she survived to write.
She's in the ghostly realm.
Yeah, she's not a Bhutni. Yeah, not a female ghost. Sakula. I was living at home when I heard the Buddha's teachings from a monk. And I saw the Dharma perfectly, new freedom, the eternal state. Who I was then left behind, son and daughter, wealth and grain. After cutting off my hair, I went forth to homelessness. I trained myself, I developed the straight path. I gave up excitement and anger, together with all that fouls the heart. Fouls may not be a good translation to use all the time. Could say taints the heart. I'm not sure. The Pali is there, but I don't know Pali. Raga, doshan, asave. Yeah. Anyway, I ordained as a nun. I remembered former lives. The eye that sees the invisible was clear, spotless, developed. I saw my experiences as if they were not my own, born from a cause, destined to disappear. I got rid of all that fouls the heart. I am cool, free. So this is interesting. I saw my experiences as if they're not my own. Normally we have an experience, any kind of experience connected with the 5 sense powers and the mental sense power, and we identify with it, don't we? We identify even with things that happened ages ago, or with things we think may happen, or want to happen, or don't want to happen. We identify with it, and with those fears, anxieties, expectations, etc. We identify with our clothes, our wealth, our money, our home, our books, our wife, our husband, our kids, our caste. In India, caste, a big deal. We identify with that, with our country. I mean, we identify with everything, right? She's saying all these experiences, she just experienced whatever as if they are not my own. They're not mine. She hasn't yoked them to her, any sense of her own identity. So it seems like she's giving up me, me and mine, which is, of course, a sign of understanding, how things exist. But she realizes everything is born from a cause and destined to disappear. Nothing inherently stays on, nothing solid, nothing permanent. So these are so good. There's just a couple more from this wonderful book, which was recommended to me by Prashant, who used to be director of Deer Park Institute in Bir, Himachal. Vasetti, her verses. These are 6 verses by her. I was wounded by grief for my son. Mind unhinged, mad, without clothes, hair unkempt. I walked from place to place, resting on heaps of garbage in the streets, in cemeteries, on highways. I wandered for 3 years, always hungry and thirsty. Then I saw the Buddha going towards Mithila, tamer of the untamed, fully awake, afraid of no one and nothing. Back in my right mind, I worshipped him and came close. Gautam taught me the Dharma out of kindness towards me. I listened to what he taught. I went forth to homelessness, forming myself with what the teacher said. I knew at first hand the blissful state. All sorrows are cut off, left behind. This is their end. Now I understand things. How could sorrow start again? Amazing. Amazing. So powerful, so direct.
Are these all, sorry to interrupt you, are these all different?
Yes, yes. Yeah, they're all, I gave, different names.
Nuns.
Yeah, different women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Many different women. Really amazing text. From Murthy Classical Library of India, Harvard University Press, Cambridge, Massachusetts, London, England, 2015. Copyright the Presidents and Fellows of Harvard College.
Own it now.
Printed in India.
I wonder how the women who wrote those
Huh?
words. I wonder how the women who wrote those words would feel about the fact that it's
Harvard.
copyright owned. Stamped.
Yeah, they would think that's a depravity. No doubt. But good things. I mean, they're very rich, Harvard. It's good they do some good things. I hear they're one of the richest universities. Huge endowment. I mean,
You might have when they were dated.
Hmm?
When were they dated?
they said two millennia ago. This lady said she got her teachings from the Buddha. So that's 5th century BC. We're talking very early material. Very early. These women were theris, or senior ones among ordained Buddhist women. They bore that epithet because of their religious achievements. Nearly as old as the poetry of the Rig Veda. They are still some of the first poetry of India. Some of the first poems by women in India. So again, from the 5th century BC onwards, but at that kind of time. Some date as late as the end of the 3rd century before Christ. So they're coming from the time of the Buddha until 3rd century before Christ. But the last in this kind of genre, it says composed in the 6th century Christian era. 6th century AD. So quite something. Let's stop there. I think plenty to discuss. It's already 12:43. We've gone over our stipulated time, but we did start late and we had a bit of a break. So people online, I'll unmute you all so you can say things. Oh, yeah. But maybe first, anybody here at Tushita want to comment on anything? There's still so much, and I didn't get around to reading Wordsworth. Well, he wrote this amazing vast poem called The Prelude.
I know it.
You know it by heart?
Not the whole.
It's amazing. And they've got the 1805 version and the 1850 version. I mean, but I won't read it now. And also the English is not easy for modern educated Indian people. And that's not a disparaging remark. It's just that we're not taught that kind of English. Even for English people, it'd be difficult. But it's so good. It's amazing. Wordsworth is amazing. I got so angry with my English teacher at school in Catford for calling him wordy mouth. So,
no, he's a hard poet to understand. I think.
Parts are,
I think Wordsworth. I think Wordsworth. Yeah. I think he seems so obvious.
Yes.
So his most beautiful poems are so straightforward and so basic and so obvious that many people who look to poetry for this elevated speech, who want Shakespeare, who want fireworks, they glance over some Wordsworth and they dismiss it. They're completely wrong, but he's a very subtle writer, and he's not, that's the reason why he's not easy. He's very easy to dismiss.
Very easy to?
It's very easy to dismiss him. When you've got 10 of the great poets side by side, and you see fireworks in 9 of them, and then his poem is just, I wander lonely as a cloud.
Yes.
It's very easy to do this. You're wrong to do this, but and also he outlived all of the other romantics and became a bit more conservative and a bit less radical and exciting and cool, because Keats died so young.
Also, people are quite cynical, right? Modern people can be very cynical.
Very much.
And nature mistake, get real,
Yes.
People are so caught up with daily life and the practicalities of life. They think people who look at trees and commune with mountains are just crazy.
Yeah.
Until they realize that that's going to be life-saving for them too, until their therapist charges them 10,000 rupees to go and do it. Otherwise, they don't do that. Yeah.
1,000 pounds.
At least.
Harley Street.
Yeah. Well, Harley Street is. Okay, Indraniji, thanks for joining. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, thanks for that. What's your name? Paul. Yeah. Okay, let's just check the chat. Okay, thank you. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed the poetry, Indraniji. Yeah. So, anything else from our stalwarts online? Is that a hands up, Elaine? Volier?
Yes, we were very fortunate, at least I was very fortunate to study the prelude in my 3rd year in Dalhousie, and it was taught by a British nun. So she,
Nun? Oh.
Our principal was a British nun, Sister Antonesia, and she taught us 3rd year English, and very much we found out how deep Wordsworth can be in the prelude. It was a tough poem, but we understood. I mean, she could explain a whole lot to us about that.
You went through the whole poem? It's very long.
Oh, yes. We had to do it as our 3rd year English literature book. So, yes, we did.
And what for you stands out from that poem that you remember that you might want to share with us?
Not very much, Kabirji. If I had the poem in front of me, maybe I could, but it was in college. That was years ago. But I remember it being a different level. And because she was a nun, so there was a lot about his view of, I won't say
it
God.
Was a nun or a monk teaching you?
Nun. She.
Yeah.
It was a convent school for girls. And so there was a lot about, what do you call it? It was a viewpoint of, for her, it was God. And very much kind of a, I won't say religious, it wasn't religious, it was spiritual. His view, his spiritual view came through in that quite well. But on another note, last year on Women's Day, we went up to the Buddhist caves near Pune, and we read the Theragatha, all the poems of the first Buddhist nuns, and it was delightful. Some of them which you read today.
Acha.
Yes.
You went with what? The Dharma Rain group or?
No, Audrey, who just left. I think just now she said bye and left. And a few of the other girls and a couple of men who are in our poetry group, they had chosen Theragatha for the Women's Day to go up to the caves, and we sat in the Buddhist caves and read it, and it was delightful.
You have a women's group? You have a poetry group in
poetry group? Yes, it's called Wild Surmise, and they read some astonishing stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
Carry on, lage raho. Thank you. We have a very talented curator of poetry, writer of poetry with us, Sujitji. He's been very quiet so far. Sujitji, anything you want to comment on or add or share? Sujit sends me amazing poetry on a weekly basis. It's amazing. Haji Sujit ji, aap hain wahan?
Please do share his poetry too, or if Sujit ji could share it with us, that would be lovely every week.
He keeps on sending amazing things. Sujit ji, are you there? I know you're there.
Yep.
Haji, kuch bolna hai.
नहीं Kabir ji.
You're being very, very humble and yes, whatever. Okay, well, then I'll read something that you sent me anyway, as a tribute to you and your curating skills. Whoops, I'm calling you by mistake. Ignore that. Chat. Sujit. He really sends some excellent material. Well, trying to find something which is. Meanwhile, anybody want to share something, please?
I was going to say off the poetry today, I thought it was quite interesting how the women's poetry was all about being on the threshold of moving from the earthly world.
Yes.
The bodily desires into the realm of enlightenment, whereas the male poetry was them being there already and not talking about that move from one world to the other.
Yes.
And I wonder why that was, and whether that was just a case of the selection happened.
That's a very good point. Yes. Women were more honest.
About
yes.
that, and the men want to show that they have this enlightenment and this is their state of being. Full stop.
Of course, the men. Well, I mean, we quoted Shapkar mainly, and he was, already said to have been enlightened. But he maybe. Yeah, it's a different style, isn't it? The women are much more modern that way.
Yeah.
In terms of sharing their experience. Yeah.
And actually,
interesting.
The women talk about themselves in a way that
men
have often portrayed them over the years as sort of disheveled and crazed and X, Y, Z, but they were happy to admit that about themselves.
Right.
And then say that they transitioned into it.
Not hiding that. Yes.
And
yes.
That was quite
Indeed. And that's okay. Yeah, let me just read something which Sujit ji sent me. And this seems very, it follows on from what you just said. It's not a poem, but, well, it's a great saying by Hermann Hesse. I have no right to call myself one who knows. I was one who seeks, and I still am. But I no longer seek in the stars or in books. I'm beginning to hear the teachings of my blood pulsing within me. My story isn't pleasant. It's not sweet and harmonious, like the invented stories. It tastes of folly and bewilderment, of madness and dream, like the life of all people who no longer want to lie to themselves. It's not a poem, it's just a quote from Hesse. So I guess if one Googles it, one will find where it's from. It's probably from one of his novels. Sounds like it could be from Steppenwolf or, Nazis and Goldmund or something. But it's brilliant. And the original German for German speakers must be something. Anyway,
That's not account of how these works have been translated.
Yes.
Because no doubt the women's poetry was translated by men.
Well, at least they've given the original Pali. They've given the Pali, so maybe women scholars could look at the Pali and see if the presumed male translators have been accurate or not.
But with any text, we're looking at it through the lens of the possibly,
of who you are also. Yes,
and of who you are.
yes, yes, yes. Hmm. Well,
Does your curator friend post that information anywhere?
Sujitji, do you post in poetry anywhere that people can access? Is there a link, Sujitji, that you can?
Yes, there is an Instagram page on which I post.
Okay, so you could type that in and I'll share it with some people here. Yeah. Hmm.
Great, we have it here.
Oh, you have it. How do you have it? Oh, you put it onto. You sent it to. Oh. What have you sent it to, Sujitji? How come you got it?
Sonali had it.
Magic.
So Sonali had it.
Sonali had it. No troublemaker. Okay. Yeah, I got something too. Instagram at Sujit Prasad. That seems quite easy. Okay. Yeah, I tell you, he has just amazing things that he shares. Amazing thing, amazing words. And keeps on outdoing himself. Okay. Okay, a short one by W.H. Auden, who's by no means a Indo-Tibetan Buddhist poet, but very great British poet. Give me a doctor, this is called. Give me a doctor, partridge plump, short in the leg and broad in the rump. An endomorph with gentle hands will never make absurd demands that I abandon all my vices, nor pull a long face in a crisis, but with a twinkle in his eye will tell me that I have to die. Thank you, Sujitji. That's one you sent me on the 7th of February. Yes.
Can I say something?
Sure, please say something about the prelude. Say it loudly so they can hear you online.
Okay. I will use my booming teacher voice.
Very good. No,
So,
I like it. I like it.
At the very beginning of the prelude,
The very beginning.
so this is lines 15 to 20, it goes,
Elaine, lines 15 to 20.
it
The
goes,
prelude.
the earth is all before me, with a heart joyous, nor scared at its own liberty, I look about. And should the guide I choose be nothing better than a wandering cloud, I cannot lift my way. Now these lines are an allusion to the very end of Paradise Lost by Milton.
Oh,
At the very end of Paradise Lost, there's a beautiful and very sad narration of Adam and Eve leaving the Garden of Eden.
oh,
And it begins with, the world was all before them. I can't quite remember the lines, but it's something blah, 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 and providence their guide. And through Eden took their solitary way. So it's a very sad ending of the that they've fallen from their
state of grace.
state of grace, but they're going to be okay because providence will guide them. A very Protestant way of looking at things. Here, Wordsworth is saying, and should the guide I choose be nothing better than a wandering cloud, I cannot miss my way. So he's saying the world is also all before me, like it was before Adam and Eve, but it's going to be absolutely fine because I can trust the things.
It's going to be absolutely fine.
Because I can trust the things, the natural world. I can trust the natural world. I can trust the resonance of spirituality that I find in the natural world. He's rejecting a certain religious conception in favor of a more spiritual.
So what happens when nature becomes increasingly destroyed? That is the great fundamental tragedy. Just read poetry.
Book 7.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So it sounds like we need to read poetry to survive. You know?
Can I add something?
Of
I
course.
think we're also, we need to kind of, the thought that comes to my mind is we are always looking at degeneration very strongly.
Yes.
And we're not looking at that there are a lot of people who are working towards generation.
Of course.
also,
Of course.
Yeah.
like
Of course.
preserving nature and
Yes.
working towards that.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I
Yes.
think we tend to be like modern, cynical, much more than.
I agree. One
Yeah.
has to mention
We
that.
need to remember.
We need to kind
There
of
is
work
still
towards
a lot
preservation and
of good
working
work
towards
happening.
nature.
Even though we've hit 1.5 or almost, and we'll hit 2, 3, 4 this century, still we have to have faith. And if there's one drop of water left on the planet, we have to, worship it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Birds on that we can still find in the city.
Yeah,
Despite the level of-
indeed, indeed.
Most polluted city. Delhi mein bahut pollution.
I think South Delhi is amazing these days. I don't feel polluted in South Delhi at all where I am, but I'm in a nice place. Okay, listen to this other angle. We heard the Buddhist women. This is written by a modern woman scholar, Miranda Shaw, who's written a lot on the Vajrayana, on Tantric Buddhism, in a chapter called Delight in This World. And this is, of course, something within the Buddhist tradition, not just to reject, but to utilize. So one who desires Buddhahood, and Buddhahood or full awakening is the goal of Mahayana, Vajrayana Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't say only certain people become Buddhas. We can all become Buddhas. We all have the Buddha nature. So one who desires Buddhahood should practice what is to be practiced. To renounce the sense objects is to torture oneself by asceticism. Don't do it. When you see form, look. Similarly to sounds, listen to sounds. Inhale scents, taste delicious flavors, and feel textures. Use the objects of the 5 senses, and you will quickly attain supreme Buddhahood. So that is from one of the tantric texts. But again, and we shouldn't misunderstand this to think, oh, great, let's just go out and eat ice creams and do what we want. There needs to be some kind of, it's like saying water cascading off a mountain can be used to power turbines. Yeah, it can, but you have to know how to do it. You have to build the channels, the turbines, it just destroy you. You just say, oh, water, you get washed away. So we have to know how to utilize the 5 senses, obviously. You can't just say, oh, great. So traditionally, Vajrayana was not taught to people who had not already developed this weariness and disgust for the ordinary, meaning the ordinary view of the world, the ordinary way of living. And I meant to mention at the beginning and forgot that from the Buddhist perspective, the teachings of the Buddha aren't meant to make our life comfortable initially. They're not meant to make us feel comfortable. How could they? They're talking about something which is going to turn our world upside down initially. Torpedo our complacency, as one teacher puts it, because they're talking about things we don't want to hear, about death, about how even our pleasures are in the nature of changeable suffering, and so on and so forth, about how things are unsatisfactory. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear about impermanence. We don't want to hear about consequences of actions, especially as they work from life to life. We don't want to hear that. And we don't want to hear about suffering. But that's what is taught. That's basic teaching. So basic teachings, the great compassion, understanding how things exist, those are prerequisites traditionally for practicing the Vajrayana, the highest teachings, where you do learn how to utilize everything as part of the path. But most people can't do that. They will destroy themselves. So yeah, just to put that in context, but that is the good news in Buddhism, that everyone has the Buddha nature, so everyone can wake up completely, even serial killers. But whether it happens in this life is another question. But there are future lives available. But then we have to work towards getting a human life, and that's not obvious. It's not prescribed that we'll get a human life because God or Buddha wants us to have it. Anyway, there's no creator God in Buddhism. So anyway, we had an interesting session, and how interesting you turned up today when I was going to do a poetry thing with Wordsworth, and two Britishers turn up unannounced, welcomed, not with bayonets and artillery and bombarding Delhi or something, or throwing us in the black hole of Calcutta, but they come as friends.
It's all right. We come on Polish passports.
Exactly.
Polish
Yeah. Not through
Oh, Polish passport. Polish passport.
masquerading.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have anything against the Poles? I think not. Probably not in India. No.
Yeah.
Not against the Poles. No. Luckily for you.
We'll bring the Polish flag then.
Okay, so just so we can talk more later, but I need to just conclude the session with a dedication. So we will dedicate from our great friend Shanti Deva, who we neglected. And just remember what he said. He said that having in this way developed disillusionment with desire, I should generate joy for solitude. The fortunate ones stroll in peaceful forests, devoid of disputes and disturbing conceptions. Then he goes on to say how one can, in solitude, really begin to meditate properly on compassion and wisdom and develop those qualities. So just this to remind ourselves, when both myself and others are similar in that we wish to be happy, then what is so special about me? Why do I strive for my happiness alone? So may we live with that, dedicate in that way. May I live and be sustained by simple common foods. And in all my lives, may I find the ideal solitude for practicing the Dharma. For as long as space endures, for as long as living beings remain, until then, may I too remain in order to dispel the misery of the world. May the teachings, which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy, be materially supported and honored and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manjughosha, the Buddha of wisdom, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop. So we dedicate us never being separated from the teachings, and our teachers having long and healthy lives. May their wishes be fulfilled, their wishes for us be fulfilled. And may our lives become genuinely meaningful for others, with whatever kind of connection others have with us, through any of the pursuits of human beings. If I meet up with people in any way whatsoever, even if people abuse us, may that become the cause for them to meet with the teachings and attain enlightenment. May we all be well and happy, free from sickness, free from ill will. Okay, thank you all very, very much. Those online who stayed with us, and all of you here, Tushita, thank you very much indeed. Have a good evening in Australia, afternoon, wherever we are. Okay. Right, that's it. The end.